Hello everyone, I'm Charlotte. In this video, my teammate Daisy and I are going to analyze an existing classroom-based assessment in Indonesia. By using the AUA framework, we will identify its strengths and weaknesses and provide recommendations for possible improvements. First, let me introduce this assessment and its context. Some ESL teachers in an Indonesian secondary school need to provide the same classroom-based assessment for all grade 9 students with CEFR level of A2 to B1. This low-stakes assessment does not lead to any consequence that holds students back and is used for two formative purposes. The first purpose is to help students improve their reading comprehension skills of understanding the content and identifying the text types. The second purpose is to improve teacher skills in teaching reading comprehension. Teachers use the result of the assessment to provide feedback to students and to make formative decisions about instruction, such as which students should take extra classes and remedial exams. The assessment is based on a unit called explanation text in the course and is the last component of a reading comprehension lesson, where a teacher will first provide scaffolding teacher-supported tasks and peer work tasks before assigning this assessment. In this 15-minute reading test, students are required to read 3 short explanation texts independently and answer a total of 10 multiple-choice questions. Among the 10 questions, 7 assessed students' ability to comprehend the content of the test, and 3 assessed their ability to identify the text types. Now we know the basic information about assessment and the context, and we will move on to the analysis with the AUA framework. Claim 1. As shown in the table, the consequences of using the reading test will be beneficial to students, teachers, and parents. For students of different abilities, students who get at least 70, which means pass the exam, will be prepared for the next unit of learning without extra support, while the students who fail the exam will take extra classes and remedial assessment. They can still join the next unit of learning as normal. These are beneficial consequences to students because research has found that differentiated support for students of different abilities ensures that students can receive full and appropriate support customized to their abilities and receive equitable education. In addition, it is possible that students can improve their English reading skills through this assessment. This test gives students the opportunity to independently practice what they have learned and reflect on that knowledge through feedback from the teachers, leading to a better understanding of the learning objectives. For teachers, they can reflect on their teaching effect through intuitive data so as to improve their skills in teaching. This consequence is a positive pushback brought by this assessment because formative tests help teachers to reflect on their teaching through students' performance so as to improve their teaching materials, skills, or strategies in the future. Additionally, through this assessment, teachers can get an important reference to help them judge the changes in students' performance by comparing these results with those of previous and future assessments. For parents or guardians, they will be glad if their children were making progress in English at school because the consequences of this test intuitively respond to whether or not students are performing well in each unit of study. Claim 2. As shown in the table, different low-stakes formative decisions are made by the teachers or students at the time of immediately after assessment, before and sometimes parallel with the next unit of instruction. These decisions will affect students, teachers, and possibly parents or guardians. About the quality of the decisions. First, the decisions are value sensitive because they take into consideration the educational values of teachers, the rules of the schools, and the social values in Indonesia. The educational values in Indonesia usually emphasize feedback, error correction, and complementary inputs to students through frequent assessments, thus promoting students' reflection and enhancing their abilities. So the formative decisions of this assessment, such as teacher providing feedback and additional input, as well as students' reflection, are in line with the general education values in Indonesia. It is also part of the school's regulations to provide additional classes and remedial exams for students who fail. Therefore, these decisions are also in line with the school's rules. Second, decisions are equitable for all stakeholders, because judging the correctness of an answer to a multiple choice question can be straightforward and free from subjective opinion, and 10 points for a correct answer, 0 for an incorrect one, and 70 out of 100 for a passing grade. This standard applies and is transparent to all stakeholders. Claim 3. First, the interpretations about the skills to be assessed are relevant to all intended decisions to be made. The purpose of this exam is to test students' comprehension of text content and their ability to recognize text types. And each of the 10 multiple choice questions tests one of these two skills. Therefore, the interpretation of this assessment is highly relevant to these decisions. Second, the interpretations of the assessment are generalizable to the student's use of English in reading comprehension. Because teachers provide adequate scaffolding support, such as teacher-supported tasks and peer work tasks for students in the content of the assessment during classroom activities prior to issuing this assessment. The interpretation of this assessment is generalizable to the student's use of English reading comprehension. Third, the interpretations of the assessment are sufficient for all decisions to be made. Since the decisions in this assessment are all formative decisions, and the content of this assessment is based on only one unit of study, the interpretations are sufficient for making those formative decisions. Next, Daisy will analyze the meaningfulness and impartiality of the interpretations.
Okay, next I will deliver the two features from claim 3. Here we can see we claim that this assessment is less meaningful. Take a look at the table. This assessment has defined all areas of language ability to assess because the objectives are clear to all stakeholders. However, what makes it less meaningful is how the rubric is not specific in showing the student's performance toward each objective. To support our claim, we can show you the backing by analyzing the link between assessment items and the objectives with the rubric. We have two objectives here. First, to recall literal information from the text, which is covered by 7 items. The second is to identify the text type, which is covered by 3 items. However, based on the rubric, all correct answers are directly summed, so we cannot see how the students perform in each objective. Okay, now students can pass if they get 7 correct answers. But what if these 7 correct answers only come from the first objective? Does it mean that the students have achieved all of the objectives? Should they just pass the assessment when they still have problems in achieving the second objective? Next, we claim that this assessment is less impartial. Let's see to what extent is the impartiality of this assessment. First, it is impartial because the content is not offensive. It contains general science knowledge. Second, the task type is familiar to the students. But see the last part. In the assessment procedure, students grade each other, which might lead to subjective bias. This claim is supported by some research, such as Sanchez et al. Highlight that in self and peer grading there is a tendency for subjective bias. Then Sadler and Good support the idea that students have more subjective judgments compared to the teacher in grading. Now we are moving on to claim 4 about the assessment record. We believe that this assessment record is not completely consistent. Before we analyze its consistency, let's take a look at the assessment record component. This assessment takes place at the end of a class period. First, the teacher distributes a worksheet consisting of 10 multiple choice items and an answer sheet. Second, the students complete the worksheet individually in 15 minutes. After the students have finished, the teacher asks the students to exchange the answer sheet with their peers. This is called peer grading. Then, the teacher discusses the correct answers with the whole class. While the teacher is discussing the correct answer, the students can deliver questions and write down the explanation as well as mark their peers' answers. Finally, the teacher collects the students' scores by calling their names, and their peers state their overall scores. The correct answers based on the teacher's key answers. Meanwhile, The total score is a sum of the correct responses. As there are 10 items, to achieve 100, the correct responses will be multiplied by 10. Some note here is there is no specific rubric that determines the student's performance toward each objective. Now let's move on to the analysis of consistency. There are two sides to this assessment. This assessment somehow has some inconsistency issues, but at the same time, it is consistent to some aspects. The first issue is the inconsistency in administration of the assessment, which has some link back to claim 3 from the meaningfulness, that the rubric used does not convey the student's performance toward each objective. At the same time, this is still consistent as all the items cover the objectives. The second issue is the inconsistency in how students' performances are scored, which has some link back to claim 3 from the impartiality, that some bias might exist during the grading process. However, this still can be consistent when the teacher values honesty and explains that this assessment is to help the students progress in the next unit. The last issue is the inconsistency across different assessment tasks. Students might still be unfamiliar with the low frequency word. Other than that, there are still some items that the answers are too obvious for the students. Take a look at one example that I provide. Students know that the topic for this assessment is explanation text, so they can easily guess the answer for number 4, 8, and 9. But there is no guarantee that they will get it right in the summative test, in which there are more than one text types provided. At the same time, this assessment is still considered consistent in terms of students' familiarity with the topics and the length of the chosen text. Now we have finished in discussing the four claims of the AUA with very detailed backing. So now we can come to a conclusion by stating the strength and the weaknesses of this multiple choice reading comprehension formative assessment. Some strengths based on our explanation covers beneficence, value sensitivity, equitability, relevancy, generalizability, sufficiency, and consistency of the assessment. On the opposite, this assessment is still less meaningful, is still less impartial, and less consistent in administration, in grading the students, and in constructing the items. From the weaknesses, we can then give some suggestions for the improvement. Like first, regarding meaningfulness, teachers should develop a rubric that explicitly measures each objective. Second, regarding impartiality, teachers should avoid peer grading and change to online quizzes to make the grading process more efficient. Further, by using online quizzes, feedback can be directly given after the students finish the test online with no need for classroom discussion. However, if there is a hindrance in the use of technology, such conventional tests might be still applicable when the name of the student is covered as anonymous. Third, regarding the assessment record, there are three suggestions we propose. One, to improve the inadequate criteria, we propose a developed rubric. We can see that the yellow columns are items to measure the first objective, while the blue columns are items for the second objective. In the scoring criteria, for the yellow items, at least 5 items must have a correct checklist to pass. For the blue items, at least 2 items must have a correct checklist to pass. So, in reporting the score, the teacher asks the students to sum the number of the correct answers for each objective. And then, to minimize the bias in peer grading, the teacher first collect all of the answer sheets and covers their student's name with peelable sticky notes. After that, the teacher randomly distributes the answer sheets to the classroom. Last, if the students do not pass the criteria for each objective, the teacher is supposed to conduct an extra class and a remedial test with a similar assessment based on the students' weaknesses. Two, to improve inconsistency in how the students are scored, referring to some suggestions in the impartiality part, the teachers should avoid peer grading in scoring multiple choice items and instead use some automatic platforms to pilot the scoring and feedback. Three, to improve inconsistency across the assessment tasks, the teacher can alternate some revisions. For example, the teacher can remake the question and provide distractors to the multiple choice options, like we can see here. So the options are being made consistent given the keywords explained and provide, but students need to analyze the overall text or function to determine the text type. Or the teacher can still use the previous item, but they can provide a short answer part under the multiple choice items to make sure that the students do not guess and know how to identify the text type. I think that's all from us. Thank you.